Hey everyone, and welcome to this brand new explainer for the Gap Advisors Ind AS Clinic. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today. We are going to take a seemingly dry accounting standard and turn it into a fascinating puzzle that we're going to solve together. Today, we're dissecting a real-world scenario involving CIF contracts, that's cost, insurance, and freight, and figuring out exactly when and how a company can actually recognize revenue. It's a fantastic case study, and by the end of this explainer, I guarantee you're going to see these transactions in a completely new light.
Now, before we get into the technical weeds, you might be wondering, why should anyone other than an auditor actually care about this stuff? Well, if you are a retail investor putting your hard-earned money into the shares of a listed company, you really need to understand accounting standards. The way a company recognizes its revenue tells you the true story of its financial reality. If you don't understand the rules they use to report their numbers, you kind of can't accurately judge the health of your investments. So, mastering concepts like revenue recognition is an absolute superpower for any savvy investor.
Just a quick bit of housekeeping before we jump in. For our scenario today, the functional and presentation currency is the Indian rupee, so naturally any other currency is treated as foreign currency. Our reporting period runs from April 1st to March 31st. And here's the really important part. While we're framing this under the Indian Accounting Standards, or Ind AS, there is absolutely no difference between Ind AS and IFRS for this specific topic. So if you're working with an entity that follows the IFRS framework, every single thing we cover today applies perfectly to you.
Now, the incredibly nuanced issue we're tackling today comes straight from the massive issue repository over at gapadvisors.com. This platform hosts over 4,500 real-world issues and detailed responses on Ind AS and Indian GAAP. And here's a pro tip, especially for you auditors out there. Anyone can register for free and submit their own queries. You literally get a detailed, fully documented response delivered straight to your inbox. That is a total game changer when you need rock-solid documentation for how you handled a complex Ind AS application issue during an audit. In fact, this specific CIF export dilemma was actually featured in the 215th edition of the Gap Advisors Task Weekly newsletter. This newsletter is authored by CA Manish C. Iyer, director at Gap Advisors, and published directly on LinkedIn. They put out over 230 editions so far, and honestly, it is an absolute goldmine of practical accounting insights.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our quick roadmap for today. We'll start with the CIF Export Challenge, then unpack Ind AS 115, figure out the ultimate decider, which is control, tackle a tricky insurance query, and wrap it all up with our conclusion.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the CIF Export Challenge, and decode this exporter's dilemma. Picture a company. Let's just call them A Limited. They export a massive amount of goods internationally. They operate under a CIF contract, meaning cost, insurance, and freight. Under these terms, A Limited has to arrange the transport, secure the transit insurance, and supply the actual goods to the destination countries. And to make it interesting, the initial term suggests that if there's a loss during transit, say a shipping container goes overboard, the insurance claim is paid directly to the importing company, not to A Limited.
So here is the absolute million-dollar question. Can A Limited look at this deal and say, hey, I am doing three totally different things here. I'm supplying goods, I'm transporting them, and I'm insuring them, so I have three distinct performance obligations. Because if they can do that, they might be able to recognize revenue in three different stages. Or do they have to look at this entire process as just one big, single bundled obligation?
To solve this mystery, we're moving to Section 2 to unpack the Ind AS 115 framework.
Ind AS 115 gives us this really elegant five-step playbook to recognize revenue. Step 1, identify the contract. Step 2, identify the performance obligations. Step 3, determine the price. Step 4, allocate that price. And Step 5, finally, recognize the revenue. For our CIF puzzle today, we are zeroing in entirely on Step 2. Identifying exactly what those performance obligations are is where this whole thing gets solved.
Now, what's really interesting here is the exact wording from the standard. It says, an entity must identify as a performance obligation each promise to transfer a good or service that is distinct. That one single word, distinct, is basically the linchpin for this entire accounting treatment. If supply, transport, and insurance are distinct, they're separate. If they aren't, they are bundled together into one package.
Right, so how do we actually know if something is distinct? Well, the standard tells us two things have to be true. First, the customer has to be able to benefit from the good or service on its own. Basically, it has standalone value.
Second, the promise to transfer it must be separately identifiable within the contract. So it's not just about whether you are performing multiple tasks, it's about whether you're promising to transfer individual items, or if you're just promising one big combined item, where all your tasks are just the inputs to get there.
Which brings us right into Section 3, looking at the ultimate decider in this whole process: control.
Control is the absolute pivot point here. The standard defines it as the ability to direct the use of and obtain substantially all of the remaining benefits from an asset. Think about it in the real world. If the customer has the power to redirect those goods while they are still floating on a cargo ship in the middle of the ocean, they have control. And if they have control during transit, that dictates exactly how we handle the revenue recognition.
So the crucial point is this: if the customer gets control the moment the goods are supplied at the port, meaning they can do whatever they want with the goods regardless of the transport, then the transport and the insurance are completely distinct promises. You literally have three separate obligations. But if A Limited retains control and can redirect the goods mid-journey, and the customer only gets control once the ship arrives at the destination, then it's a completely different story. In that case, it's all just one single performance obligation to supply goods at a specific location, with transit insurance just baked in.
Let's move to Section 4 and look at a really clever twist regarding the insurance query.
So, the person who submitted this issue asked a brilliant follow-up question. What if the terms of the contract say the insurance claim is actually paid directly to the exporter, A Limited, instead of the customer? Does that change the entire game for Ind AS 115?
And this brilliantly illustrates how the standard works, because the answer is a resounding no. The accounting standards look straight past the cash flow, right down to the economic substance. The payee on the insurance claim is totally irrelevant. The exporter might just be collecting the money on behalf of the customer just to make the paperwork easier. What the standard actually cares about is the underlying risk. Who is financially hurting if that ship sinks? The flow of the insurance payout doesn't change when control of the goods actually transferred.
And that brings us to Section 5, our conclusion and next steps for today's explainer. I want to thank you all so much for hanging out and working through this puzzle with me today. If you found this explainer valuable, please do make sure to follow or subscribe to the Gap Advisors Ind AS Clinic on Spotify, Amazon Music, or YouTube, whichever one you prefer to listen on. And hey, knowledge grows when it's shared, right? So please send this along to your contacts, your colleagues, your audit and finance teams, and especially to any students you know who are pursuing their CA course. It is so crucial to spread this practical knowledge on the Indian accounting standards. Oh, and remember, if you have your own complex Ind AS or IFRS headaches, you can book a one-on-one consultation with the author, CA Manish CIR, directly through his page on topmate.io.
Just a quick wrap-up note. The views expressed here are the personal views of the author and are not binding on the audience. We always highly recommend seeking the help of an expert before you take any action or decide not to take action based on what we've discussed today. I will leave you with this final thought. The next time you are analyzing a company's revenue figure, ask yourself, when did the control actually transfer? Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.